Not everyone is lazy, but many people are living a life they know is beneath their own standards. They wake up, do the usual tasks, think the same old thoughts, and end the day with a vague sense of drifting. Never bad enough to call it failure, yet never clear enough to call it success. They exist in a state of half awakening, half floating for one simple reason. They've never truly pushed themselves beyond what's familiar. They live under the permission of fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of embarrassment, fear of rejection, fear of starting over, fear of uncertainty. And because of fear, they settle for okay. Okay in their career, okay in relationships, okay in health, okay in everything except their self-respect, which silently erodes with every delayed decision, every safe choice, every time they avoid doing what they know they must. One thing I've realized after years of studying human psychology and behavior change is this. Most people don't lack goals. They don't lack inspiration either. What they lack is inner drive. And that drive doesn't come from someone else. Not from encouragement, not from a motivational video, not even from a great book. Those are only temporary catalysts. Real drive is born the moment you create a hard conversation with yourself, a moment when you stop indulging in excuses, stop hiding behind fatigue or busyness, and look your stagnation in the eye and say, even if I don't feel like doing this, I'll still do it. Because I don't live by fleeting emotions. I live by these standards I've set for myself. Most people don't fall short because they lack ability. They fall short because they've never trained themselves to force action when the motivation is gone. And that is the root of their mediocrity. You can see it everywhere. People who start enthusiastically but quit after a few weeks. People who claim they want change yet repeat the same behaviors every day. People who set goals and then avoid those very goals the moment they demand real sacrifice. They live their entire lives with buried potential, waiting for ideal conditions that never come. They want to do something great, but can't get past small things like waking up an hour earlier, turning off their phone to focus, or finishing a task when tired. They don't fail because they're not capable. They fail because they're not ruthless enough with themselves. The simple truth is this: if you don't push yourself, no one can do it for you. You can hire a coach, read every book, listen to all the advice. But if you won't act when no one's watching, you're still standing outside your own transformation. No one else lives your life. No one else carries the feeling you wake up with when you look in the mirror. And what builds your self-respect isn't the moments when you feel excited. It's the moments when you feel nothing at all and still do what's right. That's when you quietly forge a different version of yourself, a version that doesn't need to be perfect, but refuses to be soft, a version that doesn't need to win big, but never bows to its own laziness. I don't know what's causing your hesitation. Maybe it's exhaustion from past failures. Maybe it's the doubt you've nurtured in your mind for too long. But I know one thing: you are stronger than you think, and you'll never truly know how strong you are until you push yourself once, twice, and keep doing it until it becomes second nature. Don't wait for inspiration. Don't wait for permission. Don't expect your external circumstances to change before you begin the work inside. The people who change their lives aren't the lucky ones. They're the ones who dared to begin before they felt ready. And if you're here reading these words, then maybe, just maybe, a part of you is ready. No need for grand declarations, no need for a perfect plan, just one clear decision. Today, you will do what you know you should. Whether or not you see results, whether or not anyone supports you, whether or not success is guaranteed, because if you don't, you already know one more day will pass just like every other. But if you do, even with just one small step, then this will be the first day you stop living beneath your potential, and everything will start to change from the inside out. No one becomes successful without ever feeling fear. No one becomes disciplined without ever wanting to give up. And no one reaches the peak without having walked through moments of emptiness, full of doubt, where all motivation seems to vanish. The only thing that separates the steadfast from the fragile doesn't lie in the emotions they experience, but in how they handle them. You don't need to eliminate fear to move forward. You just need to move forward with the fear. Negative emotions are not a signal that you're wrong. They're simply part of the process, a real, living, weighty process. No one embarks on the journey of self-transformation carrying only positive inspiration. They carry doubt, exhaustion, and a sense of inadequacy too. But the difference is they don't let those emotions stop them from acting. They learn to keep pace, keep commitment, and hold on to a reason that's big enough, even on the days they feel completely hollow inside. I used to believe that strong action required strong inspiration, but then I realized that most of what makes a person extraordinary actually begins in the moments they feel nothing but heaviness, doubt, and silence. They don't wait for good feelings to start, they just start. And that very first small action, a single step, a phone call, an hour of focus, awakens the nervous system, stirs up belief, and clarifies vision. Action creates emotion, not the other way around. You don't need to be someone who's always positive. You need to be someone who knows how not to be pulled down by negativity. What matters isn't whether you feel those emotions, it's what you choose after you feel them. Don't label your emotions as if they define who you are. I feel afraid does not mean I'm weak. I feel discouraged does not mean I'm not cut out for this. What you feel is data, not destiny. Emotions only hold power when you give them the authority to decide. I want you to recall a time in your life when you overcame something hard, a challenge, a failure, a loss. You felt many things, anxiety, anger, pain, disappointment, but somehow you kept going. Maybe slowly, maybe shakily, but you kept going. And on the other side of it, you came out stronger, clearer. That happened not because you erased the negative emotions, but because you didn't let them block your path. You don't need to get rid of uncertainty. You need to learn how to live with it and act while it's still there. Successful people are not immune to emotions. They've just developed stronger mental immunity. They recognize emotions earlier. They don't overreact to them. And most importantly, they don't let temporary feelings dictate long-term decisions. They might wake up feeling drained, but they still complete the workout. They might feel unsure about the goal, but they still take the next small step. That is consistency, untouched by inner turbulence, and it's a type of consistency anyone can train, including you. If today you're feeling stuck, doubtful, or unclear, understand that you are not alone. That feeling doesn't define who you are. It only tells you that you're on the real path, because no one enters the journey of changing themselves without encountering the dark corners within. But darkness is not where you're supposed to stop. It's where you're supposed to look deeper inward and still choose to move forward, still choose to keep the promise you made to yourself, still choose to act as if you believe, even when your heart isn't fully certain yet. You don't need to defeat negative emotions. You just need to outdistance them. And every time you do that, even just a little, you're carving out a new mental trail where faith no longer depends on inspiration, where commitment is stronger than fleeting moods. Over time, that repeated action becomes a reflexive habit, and you will begin to live a life no longer pulled by the volatile shifts of your feelings, because in the end, success is not an emotional state. It's the cumulative result of the decisions you make when no one is watching. In the moments you feel weak but still hold your core. In the situations where you want to stop but still take one steady step forward. You are not your emotions. You are the action you choose, even when your emotions resist. And if today you feel something negative taking over your mind, observe it. Don't fight. Don't rush to replace it either. Just ask one question. In this state, what is one right thing I can still do? And then act. One small action. No need for inspiration. No need for perfection. But it's enough for you to keep pace, keep direction, and keep your commitment to the stronger version of yourself. Every morning when you wake up, you face a test that no one talks about. There's no scorecard, no supervisor, no alarm bell, yet it happens consistently, quietly, and seriously. Will you choose what's easy or will you choose what's right? No one forces you to answer immediately, but every action that follows, from how you pick up your phone or place your feet on the floor to how you handle a task or respond to criticism, is the answer you leave behind. And here's the catch: not answering is still an answer. Most people don't fail because they don't know what to do. They fail because they keep choosing the easier path. It's easier to avoid responsibility, easier to blame circumstances, easier to delay the important task with something less urgent, easier to accept I'm not ready instead of taking action. And those easy choices, repeated over time, create a difficult life. Not difficult in the material sense, but difficult in the internal disorder when you feel you could have been more, but you can't quite understand why you're not moving forward. Choosing what's right doesn't mean choosing suffering. It simply means choosing the action that aligns with what you already know is necessary, even if it's inconvenient. You know that spending 30 minutes exercising in the morning is better than scrolling aimlessly online. You know that completing a project will bring you closer to your goals rather than letting it drag into tomorrow. You know that keeping even a small promise to yourself is the first step toward building real confidence. But every time you choose easy, you're not just postponing progress. You're quietly weakening the bond between you and yourself. And at some point, you stop believing in your own promises because you've broken them too many times without even noticing. I'm not glorifying extremes. I just want you to understand this. The people living lives you admire aren't those who always feel excited about the right choices. They're simply people who've practiced making decisions without relying on fleeting emotions. They've learned a simple rule that most people avoid. Choose easy today, pay long term. Choose right today, gain lasting value. Each time you choose what's right, you're building an invisible pillar called inner trust, not the hollow kind of belief, but the kind born from real action. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, no matter how small, you reinforce the foundation for your next step. And on the flip side, each time you surrender to what's easy, you chip away a small piece of your self-respect. That's why some people always start strong but stop halfway. It's not that they lack goals, they lack a solid base to stand firm when easy choices appear. Here's something that needs to be made clear. Life doesn't punish you immediately for choosing the easy way. That's the trap. You postpone work today, no big deal. You skip a workout, nothing happens. You lie to yourself that you'll start next week, no one calls you out. But then one day you look back and realize you're far from the life you once imagined. Not because of one big mistake, but because hundreds of easy choices have pulled you off course. On the other hand, if you choose what's right, even if it's small, even if it's quiet, even if no one sees, you lay another brick on the road you're building. The results may not show immediately, but every right action is a declaration to yourself. I'm moving forward. What matters isn't that you always choose right. What matters is whether you're aware of what you're choosing each day, because awareness is the starting point of transformation. When you begin asking yourself, am I choosing easy or choosing right? You start seeing your decision patterns more clearly. And from there, you gain the chance to change. Not to change your whole life overnight, just to change the choice in that very moment. Start by not hitting snooze, by finishing a hard task, by saying no to something that no longer fits, by doing something you know is necessary but have always avoided. The difference doesn't come from one big breakthrough. It comes from a series of right choices repeated long enough to create momentum. And once momentum takes shape, what's right becomes what's natural. At that point, you're no longer struggling to stay committed. You become someone who lives exactly as they once dreamed, not because of luck, not because of bursts of inspiration, but because you've passed the small silent tests life gives you every single day. You can't change everything overnight, but you can change your trajectory today by choosing one right thing instead of one easy thing. Then repeat it tomorrow and the day after and so on. That's how you shift from reacting to leading. from old patterns to new creations, from helplessness to lasting belief. Every day is a test, and the good news is you always have the power to choose again. No one can take that away from you. Not your circumstances, not other people, not your past. Everything starts and ends with the choice you make today. So what will you choose? Easy or right? There's a common misunderstanding that causes many people to self-destruct on their journey of growth. They think pushing themselves means working nonstop, forcing themselves to exhaustion, proving to others that they never rest, never feel weak. But the truth is, pushing yourself the right way doesn't mean destroying yourself. It's not about recklessly spending your energy, your focus, or damaging your important relationships. It's a different kind of discipline, a discipline of clarity, of intentional action, of asking the right question. Am I doing what truly matters, or am I chasing something that only seems useful, but is actually pulling me off course? There's no shortage of hardworking people, but there are far too many who are busy with things that have no long-term impact. They stay busy to feel valuable, to avoid confronting the sense of aimlessness. They dive into to-do lists while avoiding the things that actually need to be done. That's not pushing yourself. That's a form of escape disguised as productivity. When you push yourself the right way, you don't do more, you do what matters. You're not trying to prove anything. You're simply focused on meaningful actions, even if they're less glamorous, less praised. Here's the subtle truth. Pushing yourself isn't about doing everything. It's about choosing the right thing to do and committing to it regardless of how you feel. It's the ability to cut off what's unnecessary. It's the ability to say no to distractions, no matter how appealing they seem. It's the determination to reject short-term comfort in order to stay true to long-term progress. Someone who's pushing themselves the right way doesn't always look busy. They may appear calm, focused, and quiet, but every move they make serves a clear goal. That's discipline without noise. We live in a time where busyness is admired as a sign of success, but being busy does not mean being effective. You can work 12 hours a day and still not get closer to your real goals. You can burn through all your energy and still feel like you're stuck because you're not actually choosing the right things to do. So don't measure your commitment by how many hours you work, but by the quality of the decisions you make when no one's watching, when you're alone, no deadlines, no pressure. Do you still do what needs to be done? If yes, that's when you're truly pushing yourself. One of the clearest signs that you're doing it right is a sense of inner calm. You're not frantic. You don't scramble through tasks just to fill the void. You know what's essential, and you devote time to it, not out of guilt or external pressure, but because you've seen what happens when you don't. Pushing yourself the right way comes from understanding, not fear. It's a voluntary commitment, not a forced struggle. I used to think that to prove I was good enough, I had to do more than others, try harder than necessary, stay busy to the point I had no time to rest. But I've come to realize true performance doesn't come from running faster. It comes from running in the right direction. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop. Stop to check where you're headed. Stop to recalibrate your energy. Stop to remember why you started, because if you keep pushing blindly, you'll soon lose both your motivation and your health. And that's not victory. That's spiritual suicide disguised as effort. Some days you don't need to do more. You just need to do one thing you've been avoiding. Some days courage doesn't mean enduring more, but daring to pause, recharge, and return as a clearer version of yourself. Some days the right action isn't to add, but to subtract. Subtract the excuses. Subtract the meaningless conversations. Subtract the choices pulling you away from your long-term mission. And in that space you create by subtracting, the truly essential actions will begin to surface. Pushing yourself isn't about putting yourself in battle mode at all times. It's knowing when to surge forward and when to preserve your energy. It's the ability to shift between intensity and depth. It's being flexible in your decisions, yet firm in your goals. And that's what allows you not just to endure, but to stay sharp, grounded, and connected to yourself in the long run. So if you're tired, not because you're lazy, but because you're trying to do too many things at once, ask yourself, of everything I'm doing, what actually matters? And once you find the answer, commit to that with action, not words. Don't let pushing yourself become an excuse to ignore your biological, emotional, and mental limits. Let it be a declaration that you're ready to live by what's right for the long run with precision, depth, and intention. There are things you've never tried, not because you're incapable, but because you've grown used to telling yourself you're not ready. There are potentials you've never touched, not because they're too far, but because you've never gotten close enough. The tragedy doesn't lie in not having achieved something great. The tragedy lies in having become so accustomed to a limited version of yourself that you now mistake it for your original self. And without a moment of real awakening, you might live your entire life inside a narrow frame you built for yourself, believing you only have this much capacity, only deserve this much success, and never daring to go beyond what's familiar. I'm not talking about potential as a vague motivational cliche. I'm talking about specific abilities that lie dormant inside you. The focus you haven't trained, the perseverance you haven't tapped into, the sharpness you haven't honed, the confidence you haven't lived with long enough to fully claim. You've felt glimpses of it. A moment when you handled something more difficult than usual, a time when you overcame a challenge that once terrified you, a situation where you held your ground while others panicked, and you wondered, how did I pull that off? The answer isn't magic. The truth is, you've always had that strength. You just hadn't given yourself the chance to access it before. Your ability isn't lacking. It's just covered by comfort, by doubt, and by a series of habits that make you forget who you become when placed in an environment that demands your rise. Don't confuse your comfort zone with your true limit. The comfort zone is just the place where you're used to living, used to reacting, used to behaving. Your real limits, you only discover them when you do what you once thought was beyond you, and that only happens when you make yourself do it. Not just once, but repeatedly, until the ceiling you once believed in becomes your new floor. I've seen people who thought they were just ordinary employees become exceptional leaders. I've watched those who believed they weren't made for discipline build such powerful habits that they changed the environments around them. What they had in common wasn't innate talent. What they had in common was the courage to question the small version of themselves they once believed. They realized no one else was holding them back. Not their circumstances, not other people, not their past, just themselves. With the stories they kept repeating, the limits they kept drawing, and the behaviors they kept practicing, even when they knew better, to break free from a life lived below your capacity. You don't need a dramatic event. You just need a clear choice to stop accepting the bare minimum inside you, to stop accepting outdated standards, to stop justifying with the old excuse, this is just how I am. Every person carries a part of themselves waiting to be activated. But that part won't show up if you keep choosing convenient repetitions. The more you choose ease, the further you drift from your real potential. And the more you choose what's right, even if small, even if hard, the closer you come to the stronger version of yourself you never knew you had. One of the most dangerous places to be is when you're living well enough to avoid pain, but not deeply enough to break through. When you're fine enough not to need change, but not fulfilled enough to feel like you're truly living up to your strength. That stability easily becomes a trap that lets you drift through time without leaving any mark. Because what you need isn't a predictable life. What you need is an inner force strong enough to make each day meaningful, not because it's peaceful, but because you used it to evolve. You weren't born to live below your true potential. And if you feel something inside urging you, whispering, there's more than this, that's not a hallucination. That's the part of you that wants to live right. And that part needs to be fed through action, not through positive thinking, not through setting more goals, but through something simpler, doing what needs to be done even if no one sees, even if there are no clear results yet. Every such action is a piece that restores your full self, the version of you that doesn't live under the scarcity you've imposed. The question isn't, do you have potential? The question is, are you willing to act as if you truly do? Because only when you act as if you're stronger, smarter, more disciplined, do you begin to become that person for real. You don't need to feel powerful to begin. You just need to begin to feel again the strength that's always been within you, waiting to be awakened. And if there's anyone who needs you to step into your true capacity, it's you. Not for achievements, not for praise, but because you owe it to yourself to live a life not shrunk by fear or routine, a life not designed by the feeling of just enough, but by the clarity of your untapped potential. And that life only emerges when you're bold enough to say, I will not live one more day as if this is all I am. You are more than that, and you know it. There's something terrifying about the comfort zone. It never announces the moment it begins to kill you. Not a physical death, but something even more insidious, the death of your dreams. It doesn't hurt right away. On the contrary, it makes you feel safe, reassured, free from conflict, unchallenged. But within that comfort, your vital energy slowly gets eroded. The things you once dreamed of, once promised yourself, once said you would do, they begin to fade, not because you no longer want them, but because you've grown used to living without needing to move forward. The comfort zone always pretends to be your friend. It lulls you with the feeling of just enough, with whispers like just wait a little longer, then do the important thing. It convinces you that avoiding difficulty is wisdom, that delay is protection, that accepting the present is contentment. But behind that moral facade lies a brutal truth. You're living a life smaller than what you're capable of. And worse, you're beginning to believe that's normal. Not everyone dares to admit it. Because the comfort zone doesn't always look like laziness. It can be a stable job that no longer helps you grow, a long-term relationship with no real connection, a relaxed lifestyle with no depth, a routine that's repeated but no longer inspires. You might still call it fine, peaceful, the right fit. But if you look closely, not through the eyes of others, but through the eyes of your own truth, you'll see a crack, an emptiness beneath the busy schedules, a small voice being silenced as the days pass without leaving a mark. I once thought safety was essential for a balanced life, but then I discovered real safety doesn't come from repeating the old. It comes from believing in your ability to grow. True safety means being able to adapt, to move forward, to remain grounded amidst change. The comfort zone doesn't teach you that. It only makes you more dependent on external conditions to stay steady. And one day, when change is forced upon you as life inevitably shifts, you'll realize you no longer have the inner strength to rise. So the tragedy isn't that the comfort zone exists. It's that you've stayed in it so long, you've forgotten what meaningful living feels like. You've forgotten the thrill of starting something new, forgotten the pride of surpassing a limit, forgotten the clarity that comes with making hard decisions. Those feelings, though filled with pressure, are where real life happens. No one grows in comfort. No one discovers passion, purpose, or grit when everything is predictable and familiar. If you want to unlock the higher version of yourself, you must leave it not with a dramatic leap, but with a clear, specific action that's harder than usual. Stepping out of your comfort zone doesn't mean blowing everything up. It simply means doing what you know needs to be done but have been delaying, saying no to a relationship that's pulling you down, redefining your standards for discipline, mindset, and core values, embracing the confusion, the uncertainty, the discomfort as an essential part of restructuring who you are. And you do this not to impress anyone, not to prove anything. You do it because you know if you don't go further, you'll spend your life repeating the dullest version of yourself. The question you need to ask isn't what is my comfort zone? It's what have I left behind outside of it? How many ideas never started? How many promises left unkept? How many better versions of you are still waiting outside the boundary you built? Don't wait until you've drifted too far from youth, energy, and curiosity. Don't wait until you feel like you've missed something important to finally step out. Because every day you choose to stay is a day your dream fades a little more, loses its color, dims its voice. You weren't born to stay within a small circle. You were made to expand, to build, to turn what doesn't exist yet into reality. And that will never happen if you only do what you've done, live how you've always lived. The comfort zone is not a home. It's a starting point, but many people turn it into their final destination. And that's why they never arrive at the place they truly belong. So if you feel you're doing fine but not growing, if you're busy but don't feel truly alive, chances are you've stayed too long in your comfort zone. And the only way back to real living is to step out. You don't need certainty, just courage. You don't need instant success, just the refusal to retreat. Because one trembling step today is worth more than 1,000 inner promises to wait for a better time. The comfort zone will always be there, but your dream will not. There's something terrifying about the comfort zone. It never announces the moment it begins to kill you. Not a physical death, but something even more insidious, the death of your dreams. It doesn't hurt right away. On the contrary, it makes you feel safe, reassured, free from conflict, unchallenged. But within that comfort, your vital energy slowly gets eroded. The things you once dreamed of, once promised yourself, once said you would do, they begin to fade, not because you no longer want them, but because you've grown used to living without needing to move forward. The comfort zone always pretends to be your friend. It lulls you with the feeling of just enough, with whispers like just wait a little longer, then do the important thing. It convinces you that avoiding difficulty is wisdom, that delay is protection, that accepting the present is contentment. But behind that moral facade lies a brutal truth. You're living a life smaller than what you're capable of. And worse, you're beginning to believe that's normal. Not everyone dares to admit it. Because the comfort zone doesn't always look like laziness. It can be a stable job that no longer helps you grow, a long-term relationship with no real connection, a relaxed lifestyle with no depth, a routine that's repeated but no longer inspires. You might still call it fine, peaceful, the right fit. But if you look closely, not through the eyes of others, but through the eyes of your own truth, you'll see a crack, an emptiness beneath the busy schedules, a small voice being silenced as the days pass without leaving a mark. I once thought safety was essential for a balanced life, but then I discovered real safety doesn't come from repeating the old. It comes from believing in your ability to grow. True safety means being able to adapt, to move forward, to remain grounded amidst change. The comfort zone doesn't teach you that. It only makes you more dependent on external conditions to stay steady. And one day, when change is forced upon you as life inevitably shifts, you'll realize you no longer have the inner strength to rise. So the tragedy isn't that the comfort zone exists. It's that you've stayed in it so long, you've forgotten what meaningful living feels like. You've forgotten the thrill of starting something new, forgotten the pride of surpassing a limit, forgotten the clarity that comes with making hard decisions. Those feelings, though filled with pressure, are where real life happens. No one grows in comfort. No one discovers passion, purpose, or grit when everything is predictable and familiar. If you want to unlock the higher version of yourself, you must leave it not with a dramatic leap, but with a clear, specific action that's harder than usual. Stepping out of your comfort zone doesn't mean blowing everything up. It simply means doing what you know needs to be done but have been delaying, saying no to a relationship that's pulling you down, redefining your standards for discipline, mindset, and core values, embracing the confusion, the uncertainty, the discomfort as an essential part of restructuring who you are. And you do this not to impress anyone, not to prove anything. You do it because you know if you don't go further, you'll spend your life repeating the dullest version of yourself. The question you need to ask isn't what is my comfort zone? It's what have I left behind outside of it? How many ideas never started? How many promises left unkept? How many better versions of you are still waiting outside the boundary you built? Don't wait until you've drifted too far from youth, energy, and curiosity. Don't wait until you feel like you've missed something important to finally step out. Because every day you choose to stay is a day your dream fades a little more, loses its color, dims its voice. You weren't born to stay within a small circle. You were made to expand, to build, to turn what doesn't exist yet into reality. And that will never happen if you only do what you've done, live how you've always lived. The comfort zone is not a home. It's a starting point, but many people turn it into their final destination. And that's why they never arrive at the place they truly belong. So if you feel you're doing fine but not growing, if you're busy but don't feel truly alive, chances are you've stayed too long in your comfort zone. And the only way back to real living is to step out. You don't need certainty, just courage. You don't need instant success, just the refusal to retreat. Because one trembling step today is worth more than 1,000 inner promises to wait for a better time. The comfort zone will always be there, but your dream will not. No one makes a breakthrough from a single impulse. People only truly change when they touch the familiar boundary of themselves. And instead of stepping back, they push through. There's no drum roll, no fireworks, just one very small but very clear decision. I will no longer choose what's easy. I will choose what's right. And in that moment, something strange happens. You expand, not your body, not your image, but within your willpower, your resilience, your vision, and your confidence all grow a little beyond what they were yesterday. Everyone talks about limits as if they are fixed, as if you're born with a set level of capability, a certain kind of courage, and your job is simply to optimize them. But that's a static view, and humans are not static creatures. We change constantly, and most of that change doesn't come from knowledge, but from experiences that push us past the threshold. The feeling of doing something for the first time that used to scare you, the first time you stick to a commitment longer than 3 days, the first time you don't let emotion dictate your behavior. Moments like these don't just help you grow, they redefine who you are. So if you ask me what the key to real growth is, the answer won't be found in books. It lies in the action you choose each time you're faced with two options. Go back to the familiar or step into a territory you've never controlled. And here's the truth. The first time is always the hardest, but the second time gets easier, not because the task is lighter, but because you've grown. What was once a limit now becomes your new starting point. And you're not just improving your behavior, you're evolving your identity. Every time you surpass something you once believed was too much, your brain records it as reliable evidence. Your confidence begins to have a foundation. It's no longer just positive self-talk, it's living proof. You no longer need validation from others because you possess something stronger, inner conviction. And that kind of confidence cannot be borrowed. It can't be borrowed from compliments, nor from temporary success. It comes from within, from those moments when you weren't sure you could do it but chose to do it anyway. I used to think that steadiness was the state of someone who had achieved a lot, but I've realized it's the habit of someone who has pushed through limits many times. They've made friends with discomfort, they don't avoid challenges, they don't expect things to be easy, and because they don't expect ease, they don't collapse when life gets hard. They've learned to see every limit not as a sign to retreat, but as an invitation to advance. It's people like this who truly hold the reins of their lives. And if you look closely, everything you admire in others, courage, composure, leadership, influence, was forged in moments when they stepped through what once intimidated them. No one is born knowing how to stand strong, but everyone has the opportunity to train that ability every time they confront the feeling of limitation. Every time they ask themselves, Am I truly weak? Or have I just never dared to rise before? And if you're honest enough to ask that question, you're strong enough to answer it through action. Don't wait for life to force you to grow. Proactively place yourself in situations that require expansion. Choose the harder task. Keep the promise longer. Stay with the discomfort a little more than you used to. Not because you enjoy the pain, but because you know on the other side of that discomfort, a different version of you is waiting. A person who can do what your current self cannot. A person who lives more deeply, more clearly, no longer pulled back by the invisible limits you once mistook for personality. Limits are not truths. They are simply points you haven't crossed yet. And every time you do cross one, it's not just your external situation that changes. Your entire definition of self changes. From I'm someone who gives up easily to I'm someone who endures. From I'm not good at communication to I'm learning to connect. From I can't be consistent to I'm building lasting habits. These identity statements don't fall from the sky. They are formed through behavior. And behavior is always in your hands. There's a simple truth. If you want something you've never had, you must become someone you've never been. That doesn't mean changing everything about yourself, but it does mean breaking the familiar structure bit by bit to make room for transformation. No one can do that for you, and no one can stop you from doing it except yourself. So when was the last time you broke a limit? The last time you stepped out of comfort? The last time you did something you weren't sure you could do, but chose not to back down? If it takes you a while to remember, then maybe it's time. Not to change everything, just to start with one clear action. Step up, break through, expand yourself. It doesn't matter if no one sees it, as long as you know. That is the moment you are truly alive. You don't need another success book. You don't need another motivational video. You don't need another piece of advice from anyone. You already know enough. You know what's good for your health. You know you should wake up earlier, eat cleaner, focus more, save more, and be kinder to yourself. You know what your goals require. You know which habits need to change. You know which relationships are holding you back. You know which job has expired. You even know what you're procrastinating. But between knowing and doing lies a gap, and that gap isn't measured by time or circumstances. It's measured by your willingness to take responsibility. You don't need to understand every principle to succeed. You just need to be the only one in the room willing to do what everyone else is still just talking about. Results aren't awarded to those who know the most, but to those who consistently carry out the simple things that everyone knows, but few persist with. Waking up on time, eating healthy meals, finishing tasks even when you're no longer excited, studying when no one's checking, choosing silence over impulsive reaction. Small, repeated, unglamorous actions, but precise. That is where breakthroughs begin. The issue isn't a lack of information, it's a lack of clarity between what's important and what just keeps you busy. A lack of discipline to keep promises to yourself on days when motivation is gone. A lack of ability to force yourself into action when results haven't shown up yet. No one said this would be easy, but everyone knows it's necessary, and the only person stopping you from doing what's necessary is you. Maybe you think you need to wait for a better time, but look back. How many times have you thought that? How many times have you said, wait for Monday, wait until I feel like it, wait until things settle down? How many plans once had valid reasons to be postponed and never came to life? That didn't happen because you lacked ability. It happened because you got used to letting yourself avoid action through seemingly reasonable excuses. You've repeated the habit of intentional procrastination so many times, it's become reflex. And you call that reflex me. But you weren't born with that reflex, you learned it. And if you learned it, you can unlearn it. Not by reading more theory, but by sitting down and doing. Doing it even if you're not ready. Doing it even if it's not perfect. Doing as if your life truly depends on starting, because in truth, it does. No one is coming to pull you out of stagnation. No one is going to show up and make you act. No one can play the central role in your journey but you. Inspirational people can spark something, but the steps must be yours. You can't hire someone to live with discipline for you. You can't hire someone to exercise for you, study for you, clean up the mental clutter inside your head. It all comes down to one basic act. Will you start or not? And the longer you wait, nothing stands still. It moves, opportunities move, health moves, time moves. Self-respect also slips away with every broken promise to yourself. Confidence isn't stolen by others. It gets worn down bit by bit every time you say tomorrow, knowing full well there won't be one. No one needs to witness you breaking your promises. You've seen it enough times and you're feeling the consequences, not in external results, but in how you feel about yourself every time you face the mirror. You don't have to do everything. Just pick one thing you know you should do and do it today. Just one thing. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be completed in a blaze of glory. It just needs to be right. Repeat it. Keep your word. And most importantly, make no excuses. If you wait until you feel ready, you'll wait forever. Readiness comes after action, not before. You don't need to feel strong to begin. You begin, and then you become strong. What you need is not more knowledge. What you need is more resolve to follow through on what you already know. You need to act as if you truly believe it can change you. Because only when you act do you earn the authority to say you're truly living. All the self-talk, the visions of the future, the plans you've drawn, they're meaningless unless you have the courage to start. Just a small step, but it has to be real. And if you need a reason to act, look at the future heading toward if nothing changes. You could repeat another week, another month, another year, and call it a life, or you could pause, start doing what you know is right, and slowly take back control. Take back choice, take back direction. What you choose doesn't matter as much as the fact that you choose to engage. You already know enough. Now is the time to do. Motivation is not the cause, it is the result. Most people wait for inspiration before they act. And that's exactly what keeps them stuck. They believe they need the right feeling, the right excitement, the right inner push to start something. But then the feeling never comes, or it comes and quickly fades. And the thing they need to do still hasn't begun. What they fail to see is a simple but crucial rule. Action is what generates motivation, not the other way around. You can't wait for inspiration to clean a space, write a piece of content, finish a workout, or make a tough phone call. Those things don't require emotion. They require a first move. And only after you begin, even with a small motion, your emotional system starts to shift. The mind moves from sluggishness to focus. The body shifts from inertia to motion. Thought patterns clear from chaos to clarity. And suddenly, you feel motivated, not because you sat around waiting, but because you got moving. Many people misunderstand this mechanism. They think disciplined people are always full of inspiration. In truth, they're often the ones who've trained themselves to act despite their emotional state. They don't wait to feel good before starting what's right. They begin. And then that right action becomes the anchor that helps them feel good afterward. They don't wait for the perfect time. They act within the time they have. They don't wait for the start of the week, the start of the month, or after everything settles, because they know the more you wait, the harder it becomes, the more you think, the more you analyze, the easier it is to find a reason not to start. Real motivation isn't a fleeting high. It's the feeling you get while you're in the middle of doing what's right. Not while talking about it, not while writing the plan, but right in that moment when you are doing it. You're running, learning, writing, building, solving something difficult, and you feel a current of energy rising through every concrete action. Not flashy, not spectacular, but real and unmistakable. That feeling only arrives once you stop thinking about what needs to be done and start doing it. I used to think there was some secret formula to staying inspired every day, but the truth is, inspiration comes from consistency. Every time you act, you create a new piece of evidence for yourself that says, I don't depend on fleeting emotions to do what's right. You are not a victim of mood. You're the one who leads your mood, and the only person who can do that is you. If today you don't feel excited, that's okay. Don't force yourself to feel positive. Don't waste time waiting for the right emotional climate. Just ask one question. In this state, what's the right thing to do? Then do it. Don't worry about doing it well. Don't worry about doing a lot. Just do. And immediately, your mental state will begin to shift. One right action triggers a chain of positives, energy, focus, confidence, while one act of avoidance starts a different chain. Guilt, disappointment, discouragement. The chain you follow is your choice. The habit of waiting for motivation is a disguised form of procrastination. You think you're just waiting for inspiration to do your best work, but really, you're feeding a reflex. Only do things when I feel like it, and that reflex is the enemy of progress, because there will be many days when you feel nothing, no belief, no strength, no certainty, and if you let feelings determine action, you'll live a reactive, dependent life that collapses under real challenge. On the other hand, if you build the habit of acting first, you'll begin to possess a kind of confidence no one can take away, because you no longer need ideal circumstances to do what's right. You are no longer controlled by the outside. You are the one setting behaviors, leading them, and in turn, shaping your life. The stability you seek doesn't come from the perfect plan. It comes from a string of imperfect actions done consistently, even when you don't feel like it. If you've been repeating a string of uninspired days, it's likely you've been acting less than you should. The way out isn't to consume more advice. It's to step into reality. Do what you know needs to be done. Repeat it tomorrow, then again. That's how motivation is made, not by thought, but by collision with real action. Emotion is the outcome, not the prerequisite. Motivation is the reward, not the condition. And if you've read this far, it means you already know what needs to be done. Not because I said it well, but because a part of you has always known. The question is, are you willing to stop searching for more inspiration and start taking action instead? Don't wait for motivation. Start. Because only when you start do you earn the right to call yourself a person who changes. You don't change your life in a single morning. No one builds inner strength from one explosive effort and then stops. Pushing yourself isn't a temporary high after watching a motivational video, hearing a quote that hits your emotions, or writing out a beautifully crafted plan. Those moments might spark something, but they don't sustain it. Because emotions rise and then fall. Plans may look brilliant and then get forgotten. Real pushing happens in repetition, quietly, consistently, and regardless of how you feel. It's not a moment, it's a way of life. Most people still believe change will come through a special event, a new year, a life crisis, a trip. But what truly shapes them unfolds in the quiet mornings no one sees, in the small decisions no one notices, in the moments when they could have given up but didn't. They still got up when tired, still did what was right even when bored, still honored commitments when no one reminded them. And that constant, unglamorous choice is what leads to real transformation. Persistence is not about pushing hard on the good days. Persistence is doing what's right on days when no reason feels strong enough to begin, when you don't feel excited, when the weather is bad, when everything feels out of control, when no one is cheering you on, when you ask yourself, is this even worth it? And you still do it, not for motivation, not for recognition, but because you've chosen to live by your standards, not by fleeting feelings. I used to think that one massive breakthrough would change everything. But I've come to realize that breakthrough doesn't exist without a long chain of small actions, repeated, consistent, and sometimes painfully dull. Pushing yourself isn't like a single blaze. It's like keeping a small flame alive. Not brilliant, but enough to warm, to light, to guide. Every day you tend to that fire is a day you refuse to let your life drift back into old inertia. The problem is most people don't have the patience to live that way. They want fast results. They want visible change. They want to feel like the time has come. When that doesn't happen, they stop. They think they lack the ability, but really they just haven't understood it. Pushing yourself is a system, not a surge of inspiration. It's a series of clearly set behaviors. It's a redesign of your environment, your thinking, your responses, so that you don't need emotions to act. It's deep intentionality, not waiting for someone to push you. Pushing yourself is when you reset how you begin your day, not letting your mood decide. It's when you identify your true priorities and do them first. It's when you recognize your distractions and remove them from view. It's when you refuse to let a bad day become a bad week, then turn into a bad habit. It's when you understand that living with discipline isn't harsh, it's directional. And every behavior is a brick constructing the architecture of who you are. People who live by a system aren't perfect. They still make mistakes, but they have something others don't, the ability to bounce back quickly. They don't let themselves drift too far from what's right. A slip becomes a lesson, not an excuse to quit. And that capacity to recalibrate is what makes the real difference over time. It's not speed, it's consistency. Not fireworks, but endurance. Not impressiveness, but real effectiveness. I know there are days you don't want to do anything, mornings when you wake up and feel empty, hours when you look at your schedule and just want to delete it all, but it's precisely in those moments, if you still manage to hold on to one right action, you're retraining your internal operating system. You're reestablishing who's in charge, fleeting emotions or lasting values. And you're redefining your strength, not with words, but with consistent behavior. So don't treat right action as something reserved for good days. Treat it as an essential part of your psychological immune system, a foundation you fall back on when everything around you shifts, a system you can trust even when you're doubting yourself. And remember, everyone can start, but not everyone persists. Persistence is what defines you, not a one-time result, but how you live every day. Pushing yourself is not sprinting at full speed for a short distance. It's keeping a steady breath through a long journey. It's okay if no one sees it, because you're not doing it to impress. You're doing it because you know, if you don't live this way, you'll gradually lose yourself. And nothing is more tragic than achieving everything only to realize you're no longer there. No one builds a solid foundation of inner strength through inspiration or fleeting willpower alone. To push yourself sustainably, you can't rely on just one factor. What you need is a system made of multiple elements working together, like a living structure that doesn't collapse when one part is shaken. After years of observation, experimentation, and self-adjustment, I've come to recognize 6 core pillars that determine long-term self-discipline. There's no absolute hierarchy among them, but when even one is missing, you'll feel the imbalance inside. And when all 6 are properly maintained, you'll experience a quiet kind of strength that nothing external can supply. Clear vision. You can't push yourself if you don't know where you're pushing toward. Without direction, effort easily becomes impulsive and short-lived. Vision here isn't a pretty goal to showcase. It's a vivid image of the person you want to become, the life you want to live, the legacy you want to leave. It doesn't have to be overly detailed, but it must be clear enough to become an anchor when you feel unsteady. On your worst days, vision is what keeps you from falling. It's the reminder that today's action, no matter how small, is leading you to something greater. Without vision, you live in reaction. With vision, you live with intention. A reason strong enough. Vision is direction. Reason is fuel. You can't endure anything for long if you don't deeply feel that it matters. When your reason is big enough, you'll act even without pressure. When your reason is deep enough, you won't need praise to keep going. And that reason shouldn't come from social expectations, but from your inner truth, from the values you want to live out, the regret you refuse to relive, the pain you don't want to repeat. Ask yourself, Why am I really doing this? If the answer is vague, you'll give up easily. If the answer chokes you up, you've found it. Daily action. Discipline isn't built through grand decisions, but through small behaviors done right and repeated. You don't need to do a lot. You just need to be consistent. Not every morning has to be perfect, but if you can maintain just the first hour of your day with clear commitment, you've already separated yourself from 95% of people out there. Daily action is like laying bricks. Maybe today it's just one, but after 365 days, you have a structure. What matters is not letting too much space form between right actions. Each missed day is a broken link. Each return is proof that you can reclaim yourself. Supportive environment. You can't expect inner stability if you place yourself in a setting that constantly pulls you backward. Environment isn't just the physical place you live. It's the people you engage with, the information you absorb, the rhythm of life you follow. If each day you're listening to negativity, surrounded by chronic complainers, scrolling hours of shallow content, you're eroding your own strength. Protect your energy by being selective about the spaces and people you allow to influence you. A good environment won't create results for you, but it will help you preserve your strength rather than waste it fighting unnecessary battles. Feel a great small progress. One of the reasons many people quit is because they don't see fast results. But the problem isn't the outcome, it's the way they fail to recognize small wins. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you should acknowledge it. No need to brag, just a simple nod to yourself. Every finished workout, every bad habit resisted, every page written, every new skill practiced is a step forward. Recognize it, celebrate it, because if you don't validate your own progress, you'll always feel unmotivated. And if you constantly feel not good enough, you'll stay trapped in a cycle of perfectionism without ever feeling satisfied. Perseverance even without results. Big results often come late. There will be phases when you're doing everything right and nothing seems to change. That's not failure. That's silent accumulation. The truth is, 80% of your early efforts usually produce no visible payoff. But if you stop, you'll never reach the remaining 20%. Where the real difference is made, persevering when results are clear is easy. Persevering in silence, that's when you develop the most valuable trait, resilience. Independent of feedback. That trait is what protects you when real challenges come. These 6 pillars aren't an absolute formula, but if you reflect honestly, you'll see when your fire fades, it's usually because one of these 6 has weakened. When you feel off track, it's often because you've neglected a foundation you assumed wasn't that important. Your job isn't to master all 6 at once. It's to ask, which pillar needs reinforcement today? And begin there, bit by bit, with structure, with intention. Self-discipline doesn't require magic. It only asks that you be honest with your goals, with your reasons, with your actions, with your environment, with your pace, and most importantly, with yourself. When you live that way long enough, you'll no longer try to be strong. You'll become strong naturally. There are moments in life with no grand announcements, no one calling your name, no one waiting for you at the starting line. And yet, those are the pivotal moments. Either you step onto the path you know deep down you're meant to walk, or you keep shrinking back, playing it safe, and living a life that's secure but hollow. Not everyone recognizes those moments, and even fewer have the courage to act. But the truth remains, the world isn't waiting for you to be perfect, to be fully prepared, or to have erased every doubt. The world is only waiting for you to show up. And you don't do it for anyone else first. You do it for you. Because, deep inside, there is something greater within you than what you've been expressing. A dream that's been postponed for far too long. A calling that's been pushed down too many times. A part of you, more creative, braver, more profound, has been suffocated by a predictable routine, by unnamed fears, by countless seemingly valid reasons that are in fact just prolonged hesitation. And the more you delay, the more you disconnect from yourself, not loudly, but quietly, like a small flame slowly dying out, unnoticed, unmourned except by you. This world doesn't need more people living below their potential. It needs you to show up clearly, truthfully, fully, not as a version of yourself crafted to please others, not as the person you were conditioned to be, but as the version of you who's brave enough to live by your values, to stand for what you believe, to act on the direction your heart has never stopped whispering. And when you step forward, something extraordinary happens. You don't just change yourself. You start to inspire others, not with your words, but with how you live. You don't need to be perfect to begin. You only need to be willing to never again live another day as if you have nothing to offer. Commitment doesn't come from being ready. It comes from being tired of living misaligned. Tired of staying in your comfort zone while your soul hungers for something real. And then instead of asking, what if I fail? You begin to ask, what if I do nothing? What will I lose? Not money, not opportunity, but the truest version of yourself, forgotten by you. You may think the world is too vast and you are too small, but you forget that every great shift begins with one person deciding to live from the part of them that's been left unlived. You may not change the world, but you can change someone by the way you live. Maybe it's a child watching you each day, a friend who's lost their way, a colleague waiting for a real example, or simply your future self who will thank you for not quitting. In that way, stepping forward ceases to be a personal act. It becomes a spiritual commitment, a rightful response to the gift called life. And if you've been waiting for someone to give you permission to begin, this is it. Not from an expert, not from society, but from yourself, because you don't need approval to walk the path you know is right. You don't need to prove that you deserve to pursue something greater. The fact that you can still feel it, still long for it, still lie awake thinking about it, is the sign. A sign that you haven't given up, a sign that there's more in you than you've shown, and your task isn't to convince anyone else, it's to live in a way that requires no justification. Start with something small. It doesn't have to be bold, but it must be real. One right action, one difficult step, one choice you previously backed away from, one no to what's wrong, one silence that honors truth, one moment of standing up for yourself. Each of those is a brick. Building a life no longer lived as if tomorrow is infinite. And each brick, though unseen by others, you will see because you are slowly reclaiming something precious you once lost, your self-respect. The world doesn't lack ideas. It lacks people who act. It doesn't lack desire to live with purpose. It lacks people willing to pay the price to do so. And if you are one of the rare few willing to do what's hard, not for applause, but because you simply cannot tolerate another day of half living, then you've already begun to stand apart. And the greatest difference won't be what you achieve. It will be the person you become along the way. Stepping forward is the gift you give yourself, a declaration that I am not here to merely survive. I am here to live fully. And when you live that way long enough, you won't need anyone's validation, because you will have become the living proof that such a life is possible.